Hey everybody, this is Amy with Garden Up. Today we're going to cover roses. It is a cool, crisp fall day and it is time to get these guys put to bed for winter. So, Dolly's going to help me, I guess. So what we need for rose covering, gloves are always helpful, and in the fall I always put latex gloves inside of my gardening gloves to keep my hands warm and dry because it's cold today. We will also need a rake to clean up, a shovel for scooping the compost, and the compost itself. I have a couple good brands here, G&B organic compost, which split open on me, so that's why it's on its side. And New Life also has a great organic compost. Both will work. Any compost will work for this. But you want to find yourself a good clean organic compost that won't kill your rose. So to start with, we're going to clean up around the rose. To do that, I have my favorite expandable rake. The goal here is simple. We just want to get to the rose itself. So the next thing I do after I clean up all the leaves is I use a claw or a little hoe or a hori-hori or something, but I like claws the best for this. And I take the compost and soil that's already here and start to pull it up and cover up the rose from covering the crown of the rose. The reason I do this is just to save, here's a full shovel or two of compost that I don't have to use. It's fresh. It's perfectly good compost, and there's no reason to add a whole bunch more if there's already a ton here, and over the years you're going to start to build up compost. So once I've pulled and used what's here, I'm going to grab some fresh compost and add it. Each rose needs about 2 or 3 or 4 scoops. The point is that you have to cover up the graft. That is the part that needs to be covered for the winter. If the graft is 6 inches up, then you need that mound to go at least 8 inches up. If the graft is right at the bottom, then you may only need a few inches of compost. So I'm going to cover up this rose up to where it needs to be. Also get out any other debris that doesn't need to be there. You want to go to all sides of the rose, make sure the compost is nice and tight, covering the whole crown, the whole graft, so that it's all tucked in nice for winter. Pruners, I like to take off the spent blooms. That's all you need to do. You really don't need to do a hard prune in the fall. There's 2 schools of thought on this one. Some people like to prune their roses hard down in the fall, and that's fine. It doesn't usually hurt anything. But the school of thought that I subscribe to is that the cold comes in through these stems, and if the cold gets to the crown is what kills the rose. So I want to make this path as long as possible without, having the rose be really messy looking. So I take it down so it's nice and neat and tidy, but I don't cut it down any farther than I need to, because I want a nice long stem here to protect the roots and the crown and the graft from frostbite. And so that's why I only prune a few inches off. Now this rose is ready for pine needles, so we'll go get some pine needles and we'll finish this up. So once you get your compost on your rose, it's pruned down to where you want it, then it's time to put pine needles on. You want to find a supply of nice clean pine needles, and what I mean by clean is a couple of things. You want to have as few leaves as possible. The reason we don't mulch with leaves is because leaves tend to rot. They also harbor a lot of things that tend to cause diseases in roses, and so I don't like to put leaves right on the rose. So clean pine needles are best. They're very full in tannins, which means they're resistant to rot. They don't break down very easily, and they'll last a long time. They make a really great insulation. The other thing I mean by clean is not full of pesticides. So we get a lot of our pine needles from a golf course, but before we collect any of the pine needles from the golf course, we make sure that that course does not use harmful herbicides and pesticides and things that will hurt my roses. If they've sprayed their tree with something and then raked up the pine needles, and then I put it on the rose, that could cause problems also. So I want to make sure the pine needles are clean. What I do is I just take a big handful of them, and we go all the way around the base. We don't need pine cones, just pine needles. And I stuff it in the middle. So just make sure that the rose is nice and tucked in and all covered up for winter. If you want, you can also leave a little opening at the top, kind of like a chimney, that if there is some heat buildup, it can come out. I don't normally worry about that with roses, though. That's more of a concern with hydrangeas and a few other plants. But there you is. That's how you cover a rose and bed it down for winter.